Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second operating budget forum for the 2023 budget process. Today, we will be talking about permits, planning, and land use. My name is Patrick Cornell, and I am the Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. With me tonight, I'd also like to introduce Jake Pollack, if you would like to say a few words.
Thanks, Pat. Good evening, everyone. Jake Pollack, Deputy Mayor for the City of Pittsburgh and Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll be coming back into the conversation when we get to the question and answer portion at the end. But in the meantime, thank you for being here, and I'll give it back to you, Pat.
Thank you. And I'd also like to introduce Adam Clevenger, a budget analyst in our office, who will be doing some presenting later on as well.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Adam Clevenger. I'm budget analyst with Office of Management and Budget. And yeah, I'll be back on a little later once we get into the interviews.
Great, thanks, Adam. Adam is also running PowerPoint for us tonight. So when I say next, we know we're good to go to the next slide. So if you let's get started. And in advance, I'd like to thank our interpreters who are here with us tonight. We really appreciate your work. So tonight we will have a general overview of OMB and what the Office of Management and Budget does. I'll talk a little bit about how permits, planning, and land use are related to our work in the Office of Management and Budget. And then after that, I will bring on three of our directors for the city. Director Sarah Kinter for permits, licenses, and inspections, Director Karen Abrams for city planning, and Acting Director Jen Gula in the Department of Finance. We'll have a little bit of a Q&A session, interview style, with each of these directors. And then we will tie it all back together with some opportunities for engagements. And then we will have a question and answer session with participants. If you have questions in the meantime, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will read those through as we get to this end session. So the Office of Management and Budget has two different divisions. We have different teams in each. There's the Management Division, which is led by Deputy Mayor Jake Pollack, like we mentioned earlier. That also houses our chiefs, our Chief Operating and Administrative Officer, Lisa Frank, and our Chief Economic Development Officer, Kyle Chintalopoli. The Management Division also houses our procurement team, led by the Chief Procurement Officer, Jen Oltzinger. And within this team also lies our fleet team, so vehicles. On the budget side, I lead three different groups. We have the capital team. They work on the capital budget, as the name implies. There's the community development team, and they are the ones who manage our federal funding from housing and urban development. So these programs include community development block grants, housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, emergency solutions grants, and home investment programs. The operating and special revenue teams work on the day-to-day operating budget, as well as some of our special revenue accounts, which are separate from the capital fund, separate from the general fund, and separate from our community development funds. Our grants office is also housed within this special revenue program. Go ahead, Adam. Thanks. So first, I want to start with a quick overview. What does the city government have control of, and what do we not have control of? So here you'll see a map of the city of Pittsburgh split up into its 9 current council districts. We know that reapportionment has just finished with the census, so those will shift at the start of next year a little bit. But from the big perspective, the city does not have responsibility for services that are outside of these colored council districts below. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't work very closely with our neighboring boroughs and townships. A lot of times we come into intergovernmental cooperation agreements, and that allows us to partner with our neighboring local governments. So for example, with the borough of Wilkinsburg, we have a shared fire services where the city of Pittsburgh firefighters actually provide fire services for the residents in Wilkinsburg. And we also collect their trash services. So there are a few agreements like that. And in general, there are some other, opportunities for us to interact with other municipalities. Go ahead, Adam. Thank you. So we also do not have legal authority over the following. And this is a pretty long list, and it just goes to show you how there are a lot of different governments that overlap and intertwine. So we do not have authority over county, state, or federal roads and bridges. The school system is run by Pittsburgh Public Schools. That is a separate form of government. Pittsburgh Regional Transit runs our bus and trolley system. That is a separate form of government. The county handles health services and most human services and the jail. There are various levels of courts within the city of Pittsburgh proper located, but the county, state, and federal government all run those. There are also other non-city of Pittsburgh public safety response teams. So there's the county sheriff office, the county police office, officers. There is, different university response teams. And we, again, work closely with all of these public response teams through mutual aid. So if we need help, they'll send help. If they need help, we'll help them as well. Our water infrastructure is handled by a related authority, the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, and sewer is handled at the county level with Alcosan. And finally, the public parking infrastructure and enforcement is handled by the Pittsburgh Parking Authority, which is related to our city government, but still is its own separate entity. And again, we do have, you're good, Adam. We do have cooperation agreements with many, if not all of these groups for different services and tasks. So we have two different budgets. The operating budget that my team is in charge of funds our day-to-day expenditures. And the capital budget has a more strict set of definitions, and these are funding projects that are, one, used to design, build, restore, retain, or purchase any city-owned asset. These have a minimum value of $50,000. They have a minimum useful life of at least 5 years, and they're primarily funded via municipal bonds, which is when we take out debt, or pay-as-you-go, which is a transfer from the operating budget, or federal or state funding, or some other grant opportunity. And like I mentioned before, we have our community development team, and those funds are housed within the capital budget because of that last bullet where they really come from federal funding. So what does each budget fund? Getting into a little bit more detail. On the operating side, we fund employee salaries and benefits. We fund pension, debt payments, which are when we pay back the bonds that were issued on the other side of the equation. Lease payments, utility payments, ongoing building maintenance, fuel and vehicle maintenance, office supplies, pens, paper, pencils, etc. Computers and software, internet for our city facilities that we're using right now to communicate with you, and professional services. The capital budget, on the other hand, funds the construction and major upgrades of roads, which includes paving and traffic signals with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. Bridges, again, ones that we own and are responsible for. Public sidewalks, public parks, healthy active living centers, recreation centers, and other city-owned buildings, like the city county building where my team's offices all are. The capital budget also funds city vehicles and heavy equipment, major new technology projects that meet that price threshold that we discussed earlier, and community development, which includes projects with the URA, the Urban Redevelopment Authority, and community development block grant funding, like I mentioned earlier. So here's an example of how things, or several examples of how things are different but related. So in the top left image here, we have Chief Jones, our chief of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire. His salary is funded via the operating budget. His turnout gear that you see him wearing is funded via the operating budget. And the corresponding picture on the right-hand side of the screen are actual fire trucks. Those are funded via capital. On the bottom, there you go. On the bottom left-hand side of the screen, we have one of our refuse workers in DPW, the Department of Public Works Bureau of Environmental Services. The salary for this worker is funded in the operating budget. On the other side of the equation, the public litter receptacles that the worker may empty and things like that, are funded out of the capital budget because of that category as an asset. Go ahead, Adam. All right, so quiz number 1. Here we have a picture of residents enjoying Moore Park in Brookline. What budget would fund what you see in this photo? All right, we have a mix of answers. About 57% said operating and 43% said capital. Adam, if you go to our next slide, please. That was a trick question. The answer is both. I couldn't help myself. So from the operating side, on the right-hand side, there's a lifeguard. City of Pittsburgh lifeguard salaries are funded in the operating budget. Utilities, including the water that fills up the pool, the electricity that funds the recreation center. You can see some of the court lights in the background. That's an operating expense, and things like pool chemicals. Now on the capital side, the pool lining, which was recently worked on, is a capital expense, and something like the roof and actual building itself on Moore Recreation Center is a capital expense as well. So the operating budget cycle runs on our fiscal year, which coincides with the calendar year. So every January, we start the new fiscal year. The budget process itself for the following year kicks off in spring and summer with public engagement. That's where we are now. Also in the summertime, we have directors submitting their requests to the Office of Management and Budget. At the same time, the Department of Finance analyzes revenue projections and makes forecasts. Moving through August and September, what happens is the operating team works with each and every department. We analyze proposals for their financial impact, their environmental impact, and their equity impact. And what happens is we work with department directors, we work with the deputy mayor and the chiefs, and we make recommendations to the mayor. The mayor goes through each proposal, and at the end of September, the mayor submits a preliminary budget to City Council by September 30th. Now, after that, I'm excited to say this year we will jump back into public engagement between the September budget and the next iteration of the cycle. So through the month of October, we will reopen budget engagement this year, which is new with the Gainey administration. And I'm excited that Mayor Gainey is excited about this as well. From there, we will make adjustments as needed, based on resident feedback, based on departmental feedback. And then in mid-November, the mayor formally presents the budget to City Council. And this is set in our founding documents, charter and code. From there, my team is hands off. We are no longer responsible for the document. City Council takes over. City Council has their own budget office. And from there, they will hold hearings with each department director. They can make amendments, they can propose amendments, they can vote on amendments and make changes. They must be approved by the end of the year, December 31. So then we move back into the cycle and really start all over. During all of this, the operating team is constantly monitoring expenditures, and we're reporting on expenditures each quarter. We are working on special projects, and we are trying to help departments, make any improvement they may need as we move back into the next part of the cycle. So what's in the operating budget document? It's a big file, several hundred pages. Here you can see on the left-hand side the cover. You'll note that it says February 5th, 2022, final as amended. The budget was tweaked a little bit from when it was passed last December. A lot of that is due to the inauguration of Mayor Gainey. So what's in the document? We start out with a budget guide. It offers a lot of good information that I would highly recommend you take a look at. Some of the things it explains would be the same budget process that I just went through. It goes into a little bit more detail about our accounting structure, our fiscal year, the division of what we put in the accounting system and how expenditures and revenue really broken down and split up into categories that make sense for us to analyze and work through. There's a target budget, and this is I call it the heart of the document. This is where we show the total revenue and total expenditures for the current year, but we also have to have a 5-year plan. So our 2023 budget will also include a 5-year plan that covers 24, 25, 26, and 2027. So this target budget shows revenues and expenditures for it will for 23 and the following 4 years. And it will show us a few key target indicators that help us have a quick idea if the fiscal health of the city is okay or not. And I'll get into that in a few seconds. Following that, there is a breakdown of departmental detail. So each department has its own section in the budget. You can see an organizational chart. You can see the mission and divisions of each of these groups. From there, you can see what in the accounting structure, what subsections and subclasses, as we call them, are targeted to receive and approved to receive in both, the upcoming budget year, what they were for this year, and what they were actually for the most recent final fiscal year. There's also a position summary, so you can actually go in and see, for example, in the Office of Management and Budget, how many full-time staff members and part-time allocations are targeted for our office. Moving through, there's also debt and pension information. There's a fee schedule. We have lists of our special revenue accounts. We have lists of open and active grants. It really is a wealth of information, and we hope that it gives you a good idea of what is happening in the city and what our priorities are and what Mayor Gainey's priorities for 23 will be as we move through. So I know that numbers are difficult to sometimes wrap your head around, so I'm only going to give you 4 right now. In 2022, we are budgeted to bring in $658.8 million across all of our revenue sources. That includes real estate, earned income, permits, licenses, inspection fees, intergovernmental transfers from some of our neighboring municipalities or the state or the federal government, fines and forfeitures. There are several different categories. Expenditures, we are expecting to spend, assuming everything moves through, $615.1 million, which leaves an operating result. It's just revenue less expenditures of $43.7 million. From there are also a few transfers out. So there's transfers to the Housing Opportunity Fund, which is managed by the Urban Redevelopment Authority. That's $10 million. There is a transfer to the Stop the Violence Trust Fund, an initiative spearheaded by Reverend Burgess and Councilman Lavelle and City Council. And there are a few other smaller transfers as well. So when you take all of that together, what happens is you get a sense of the fund balance, which is kind of like our rainy day reserves. And one of the ways, like I had mentioned earlier, you have an indicator of the fiscal health is you see how much of a fund balance we're expected to have. So I'll tell you right now, in 2020, that operating result was actually a deficit in our actual revenue that came in with COVID-19 and the pandemic was less than our expenditures out. So what that does is it eats into our fund balance. Something like last year at the end of 2021, we kind of anticipated and adjusted our forecast and had a better, more realistic sense of both revenue and expenditures. And we did have an operating result. And what that does is it slowly builds up the fund balance. The goal here is to be able to fund several months of city operations if there is some catastrophe or horrible scenario. We want to be able to have an ability to tap into some funds on the side. Same way we would, you would have a savings account and be able to tap into that. Go ahead, Adam. All right, so what are we talking about tonight? Permits, planning, and land use. So One thing that I'd like to note is you're engaging with permits, planning, and land use, even if you don't know that you're engaging with permits, planning, and land use. So on the active side, if you're buying or renovating property, that's pretty self-explanatory. You will have to move through permitting. You'll have to move through design. You will have to, work with our real estate teams. If you're operating a business, likewise, you might need to get some permits to open up for the first time. You need to make sure that you have all of your necessary approvals from the city to work through. If you work in construction, et cetera. But even if you're not actively participating in one of those functions, if you shop, eat, go to events, or really enjoy public spaces within the city of Pittsburgh, you're engaging, right? Because even if you're not doing that or operating or opening a business, someone else is. And they had to go through the same steps to get you there. Go ahead, Adam. Thanks. So what does our team in OMB have to do with this? From the management side, there's obviously top level oversight. There's communications across departments with the mayor, with external parties. That is critical to make sure that everyone is coordinated and working through to provide the best services that we can. On the management side, there's also regular procurement of services, including issuing requests for proposals. With all three of the departments that we'll be talking to tonight, there's plenty of procurement to go around for everyone. With fleet operations, especially for PLI, permits, licenses, and inspections, our staff have to get from site to site, so their vehicles are really handled on the management side of this. On the budget side with my team, what we are going to be doing is making adjustments to staffing needs. That can happen, in a budget neutral way during the year, or it could happen right now as we're working through budget requests. We also sometimes find ways to get creative to pivot available funding to meet new initiatives. We also do a lot of costing for these related initiatives. So if there's a new idea that everyone thinks will be a great asset for the city and really help with stewardship, and making the best use of our city dollars, we'll do costing for staff, we'll do costing for supplies, and we'll really try to get through. All right, quiz number 2. After we move through this, I'll let Adam take the reins a little bit. So how many full-time inspectors are budgeted in PLI for fiscal year 2022? Is it A, 18, B, 34, C, 55, or D, 72?
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, so the results came in, and the highest number that was in there was 34. That's we got the most results. And for that, we actually have 55. So right here, you'll see where they're broken down to. Construction code has 21. Stormwater construction has 3. Fire has 3. Combined electrical 5. Code has 20, and vacant property has 3. So it's a good number of inspectors. Very important work. And up next is going to be Director Kinter. She's going to share her presentation for us. And after that, we'll have some questions.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
So thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me, and thanks for participating in this forum. The mission of PLI is to improve and ensure the safety of the built environment in Pittsburgh. And we're empowered to carry out that mission through the enforcement of the city's building, zoning, and licensing codes. Our mission relies on having robust permitting operations so that construction in the city meets construction code requirements, and robust code enforcement operations to issue citations and gain compliance for structures that do not meet the minimum safety standards. Today, we wanted to talk about and provide an overview on how the operating budget supports PLI's work to regulate building safety in Pittsburgh and what your tax dollars pay for when they go to PLI. So this is our organizational chart, and it gives you a sense of scale of the department. And I think it's helpful in understanding the division and duties and where our inspectors are located. I did not know that that was going to be a survey question, but it was a really great, I think, point in terms of the number of inspectors that we have in the PLI team. I mentioned before, PLI is responsible for the administration and enforcement of the building codes, property maintenance code, and select licensing codes under Pittsburgh City Code. And we also enforce the zoning code on behalf of our sister department, City Planning, in terms of inspections. So we have over 90 positions in PLI, and all of our positions work in support of our mission for building safety. There are two things that I like to stress about PLI. One is that there's a tremendous volume of work. So we've focused on adopting operations that can meet volume with success. And two, that our staff have a really high degree of technical expertise in building codes and enforcement to appropriately administer and enforce the codes. Nearly every employee that you see here in this chart has passed examinations to onboard into the department, and we are obligated to continue or to obtain continuing education credits to maintain those certifications and our expertise. So a large portion of our non-salary budget is used to support continuing education obligations. So a quick overview of staff and what they do. Starting on the left in the red and the orange is our operations division, which focuses on code enforcement. That includes operations inspectors who pass the property maintenance code tests, and they inspect for property maintenance and zoning code compliance, and a select business license compliance of business licenses that are called out in our Pittsburgh City Code. In the red is our fire and life safety inspectors who obtain the fire code certifications to inspect high occupancy structures and ensure that the annual and quarterly maintenance and testing requirements for fire alarm and fire suppression systems and fire life safety systems are met. This unit also includes our vacant property inspectors who respond to condemnable, vacant, and abandoned building complaints. Vacant property inspectors work to continuously monitor condemned buildings in the city and help identify structures eligible for city-funded demolition. PLI is responsible for demolishing imminently dangerous and unsafe structures in the city as a matter of public safety. In the blue in the middle is our licensing and administration unit, which really supports the full department. Our clerical staff work to send out violation notices or requests for compliance letters to ensure proper noticing of code violations in the city. They maintain our department records, respond to hundreds of right to know requests, and handle court scheduling for our department. This unit includes application technicians who serve as the public's first point of contact in customer service for PLI, and they intake all city planning and PLI applications and assess whether they belong in the plan review queue or can be issued. They pass a permit technician national exam to onboard into their jobs. We also have a smattering of non-union roles in this division that help support our technology efforts and systems, ongoing record retention projects, revenue collection, personnel equipment needs, and continuing education management. This unit has been really key in helping the department digitize our legacy documents so that we can truly be a paperless department. And over the last 3.5 years, our office has worked to digitize over 1.5 million historic records from microfiche, microfilm, and paper to help reduce our physical space footprint needs and to meet requirements to maintain construction and permitting documentation for the life of a building. Moving over to the green is the construction division, which includes our plans examination team, which is made up of architects and engineers that ensure life safety compliance under the construction code is met. They pass a minimum of 12 certifications to onboard into their job pertaining to the review of building, energy, fire, electrical, accessibility, and mechanical code requirements. Plans examiners also serve as our on-call staff for after office hours emergencies. So if there's a 911 call for a structural issue, they serve on rotation to respond. That could be for a fire, a car running into a building, crumbling or dangerous facade, or a landslide involving a structure. In the yellow and light green are construction inspectors. They are a very, very busy bunch that attend job sites to ensure that work is occurring safely to code and to the approved drawings and permits that were issued by the department. So this is what the departmental budget supports. Why does it matter? When we build structures in our communities, they're typically here to stay, right, for centuries sometimes. How we build it and how we maintain it matters. And the health and the resiliency and safety of our built environment has a direct connection to our quality of life. So when PLI ensures conformance to the construction code, it has tangible outcomes. It means improved energy efficiency for buildings, improved access for persons with disabilities. It ensures resiliency against floods and landslides and private development, and ensures safety in case of emergency for our public and for our first responders. I like to give a sense of volume of the public services provided by each division that we just looked at. So starting with that operations or code enforcement side, again, those inspectors that enforce property maintenance, zoning, fire and life safety maintenance standards. We received over 15,000 complaints through our 311 system in a year's time. And we self-initiated over 4,500 cases of violations found just while conducting business out in the field. In a year's time, that unit completed over 36,000 inspections related to those complaints. Our inspection process is such that we go out 3 times for an inspection before we issue a criminal summary complaint and go to court to enforce the issue at the local magistrate. When our code enforcement team receives a complaint and conducts an inspection, 63% of the time a violation is issued. And one thing that I like to note is that inspectors do have limitations. We need to ensure that we have right of entry and we're not intruding on anyone's Fourth Amendment rights. So we can only gain entry when access is granted by a first responder, access is granted by a property owner or tenant. We could see the violation from the public right away, or if we're investigating from an adjacent property that the property owner has allowed us on there, onto their property. Code enforcement citations are public, and the public can track and see all violations issued by PLI on our website and it's called Agency Counter now, which I will place into chat for folks to click around in. PLI's code enforcement system is also directly connected to our 311 complaint system. So for folks that file complaints through 311 and enter their contact information, you can get information back about whether the inspector issued a violation or not and why. Of those inspections that result in a violation, 56% of the time, the violations are corrected or abated before that third inspection when we issue a criminal summary citation. An additional 32% are abated after we've gone to court and we've issued that criminal citation. So typically the code enforcement process does compel owners to meet building safety requirements. Those that 10 to 12% of cases that remain open or unabated or go through cycles of enforcement are a mix of really hard cases. They can be either what we call dead end cases, where the owner or responsible agent is deceased. In some of those cases, the owner wants to do the right thing, but they're working through the process to find resources to abate the violations. And sometimes we're truly dealing with some nuisance properties. So we're looking forward to building stronger relations with our city law department to assist in taking legal action to better address, especially that last category of tough cases. Different neighborhoods have different code enforcement compliance challenges. When you take away weeds and debris complaints, you can see the different built environment compliance needs in different neighborhoods. In the red, we see building maintenance violations primarily. In the blue, we see the most building permit related violations, either building without a permit or not getting inspections. And in the green, we see the most vacant building violations. So these can serve as indicators of the built environment. So given our high volume of work across all of our divisions, PLI has a strong focus on operational and technology improvements. Our technology investments into One Stop PGH have allowed us to adopt a consistent and transparent workflow in our permitting, licensing, and code enforcement operations. One Stop PGH is our online one-stop shop for all development applications in the city, and it includes PLI, the Department of City Planning, the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, and some Fire Bureau permits. One Stop PGH is also very, very much a work in progress. We have a strong foundation and a roadmap for enhancements. Much of our work now revolves around improving our business operations and collaboration with our sister departments as we work to continue to streamline the development process. So the goal is continual improvement. So let's talk about construction permits. Again, I think it's important to give a sense of scale of PLI's permit volume. At the first point of intake for permits, we have the work of our application technicians, and those are the frontline staff for customer service, and they're responsible for checking applications for completeness before they're reviewed and for issuing construction permits. So they performed over 50,000 application actions in a year's time on behalf of both PLI and city planning, and they take in thousands of calls and chats annually. They're also responsible for issuing repair permits. Those are permit types that we call minor alterations. They don't require review. They don't need construction drawings. So if someone is applying for a roof patch or a window replacement, application technicians get those permits out within 1 to 2 business days. Annually, they issue about 3,000 minor repair permits. On our plan review unit, yet again, we see improvements to our construction plan review times. Plan review is the part of the permitting process where our in-house architects and engineers review drawings to make sure that they conform with the construction code standards. The volume has maintained over the last few years. It hovers around 9,000 reviews annually. And we've committed to service level agreements with our customers so that they can depend on a complete review consistently every time. That's the goal. For commercial projects, we have a 30-day review period. For residential projects, we have a 15-day review period. And by and large, on average, we respond to an initial review almost 2 working weeks faster than our service level agreement. And we meet our service level agreement 99.9% of the time. The goal in plan review is to be transparent about what we're reviewing for. But we do see that on average, customers go through the review process twice. And our goal, and the customer's goal, is to get through the review process once. So on that front, our plan review team has published some plan review checklists to the public and especially to design professionals. These are a list of requirements that our staff reviews for code compliance, and they're available on our website. And design professionals can use this list to make sure that their submission contains all those elements with the goal of getting through the plan review process in just one review. And that's a win for us, and it's a win for the customer too. In March of 2022, just a few months ago, we launched a pilot accelerated plan review program. And this program allows our customers to pay an extra fee for a PLI plan review staff to complete outside of normal business hours during voluntary overtime. So far we've launched this service for fire alarm and fire suppression systems. And you can see here that we've completed 65 overtime reviews from March to May. And our staff turnaround averages just under 3 days for accelerated reviews. So we are looking forward to expanding the service to other permit types in coordination with our sister departments. In the construction inspection world, in a year's time frame, our construction inspectors have completed over 32,000 inspections. In addition to those scheduled inspections requested by our customers who are trying to close out permits, construction inspectors perform enforcement inspections to issue violations or citations related to construction code violations. So that could be working without a permit, working outside the scope of the permit, or working and completing work without calling for inspections. Inspectors are making sure that whatever the department approved in the plan review and what the code requires is what's happening out in the field during construction. And by and large, we see compliance. We've seen an 88% passing rate in our inspections in the last year. One highlight of the one-stop PGH system is that the permit holder receives an inspection report that includes a checklist of what the PLI inspector inspected for, with a pass or fail determination for each item. so that we can be transparent about what we're looking for out in the field and what you need to do to pass if you did fail the next time we perform an inspection. Related to the permitting process, PLI also runs a licensing program to ensure that permits are obtained by contractors and trade license holders who are qualified and connected to businesses that pay their city taxes and have proper insurances to work in the city of Pittsburgh. So we see a steady population of about 900 general contractors licensed at the city and a consistent number of trade license holders each year as well. In November of last year, November 2021, City Council passed a comprehensive lead safety bill that PLI worked to operationalize this past May 2022, 6 months later. And one key component of that lead safety bill is requiring general contractors licensed by the city, by PLI, to obtain an EPA renovation, repair, and painting certification to ensure that construction work, when it's happening in the city of Pittsburgh, is happening in a lead-safe manner. So when you disturb lead-based paint during construction work, you create lead dust, which is toxic and is especially harmful to young children, and it can also harm workers on the job and residents too. Lead safe work practices control lead dust to protect workers and our residents, and that's what that EPA renovation, repair, and painting certification teaches too. So we are monitoring that requirement and assisting folks into getting into compliance with that. We did work with Women for a Healthy Environment and our OMB procurement team to provide a low cost EPA lead safety training to general contractors, which is still ongoing. We've had over 120 contractor participants since May. So pretty good turnout so far. So bigger picture, PLI annually issues about 10,000 permits since 2015. And so far in 2022, we've issued just over 4,000 and project that we're on track to issue just under 10,000 by the end of the year. So construction activity in the city remains strong. When we look at the reported value of construction on permitted jobs, we see a similar trend. We had just about $1.2 billion of permitted work in newly issued permits in 2021, and project that will just get over 1.2 billion by year's end in 2022. When all this new work meets the standard of the code requirements that PLI enforces, it improves the quality of our built environment. And again, that means improving energy efficiency for our buildings, accessibility, resilience to floods and landslides, and safety in case of emergency for our public and for our first responders. And just sort of the wrap up here, in addition to the day-to-day work that we just reviewed, PLI is committed to continuous improvement in our permitting and our code enforcement divisions. In the last year, we've continued to work on making our construction permitting process more transparent and accessible to customers, and work to provide the best level of service to the most amount of people. The operating budget supports the staff and the programs to ensure quality improvement of our built environment and a code enforcement program in the city. Just to highlight a few accomplishments for last year, we listened to customer feedback and made adjustments to our permit process to make it more affordable for customers to switch to a different trade or contractor license holder or change the scope of their job. We've provided bulletins to provide code interpretations and guidance for design professionals to make successful submissions to the department. We launched the accelerated review pilot program, as I had mentioned before, and we published our plan review checklist to design professionals. We worked with the City Council this past spring to eliminate 6 legacy business licenses from city code to simplify and streamline requirements for business owners in the city. We provided 8 hours of continuing education to our PLI licensed electricians, HVAC mechanical, and fire suppression system license holders this past spring to educate on the 2018 construction code updates and increase code knowledge and safety in Pittsburgh with the Building and Fire Code Academy. We carried out Council's comprehensive lead safety ordinance, which included a registry program of child occupied facilities for children 5 years or younger to inspect for lead hazards, to inspect DPW facilities open to the public for lead hazards, to gain lead safe hazard certifications in our operations unit, and to update our demolition contracts to include specifications to perform lead safe city funded demolitions. And we also began enforcing our city's stormwater Title 13 update this past March 2022, which really controls discharge of stormwater in large developments. So with that, happy to take a pause and kick it back over, I believe, to Adam.
Thank you, Director Kinter. I think you really had a thorough presentation, and it really shows what all your department does and how all the operating funds really go to great use with your department. Just as a reminder, if y'all put questions in the chat at the very end, we'll have questions and answers, and that's where we'll be answering them, but feel free to send them through the chat. We'll make sure to get to those at the end of this. Director Kinter, I think you really covered a lot of the stuff that we wanted to go over, so really appreciate that. And thank you for getting on here and going through your presentation. Up next, we're actually going to have city planning. But before that, we're going to do another little quiz that we'd like you all to participate in. So this third quiz is the 2022 operating budget for city planning ranks as the blank largest out of the city of Pittsburgh's 29 cost centers. Great. So that poll, the highest rank was 8th place. And I'll share these results so y'all can see that. Second, people thought it might be the 4th highest. And for that, it's actually the 18th. So the operating allocation this year is just under 4 million. In comparison, finances is 174 million and PLIs is 8 million. So with that, up next is city planning. And we'll have Director Abrams come on here as well.
Well, I think we're supposed to do a nice little Q&A, Adam. So
we are. We definitely are.
So hello, everybody.
Yeah. So Director, you joined the city this year. Could you please introduce yourself, and for the residents who have maybe haven't had the opportunity to meet you yet?
Of course. Again, my name is Karen Abrams. I'm actually originally from New York City, and I came here about 12 years ago and began working at the Urban Redevelopment Authority. So it's my first venture into city government, quasi-city government kind of. So I've had some experience with the city in that regard around economic development, mostly around community engagement and some small scale planning exercises. So I've worked with city planning in the past in my past capacity. And then I went to the Heinz Endowments for about 4 years as the Equitable Development Program Officer there. So again, working with some of the city agencies, as well as city departments, including city planning. So, and then just recently in February, I was picked by the mayor and then, gone through a city council hearing, and here I am as the director of city planning. So my, background is I've got a bachelor's degree in African-American studies and European history. And I have a master's in sustainable systems from a school up north of here. And I spent a year at the Harvard Graduate School of Design as a Loeb Fellow. So I have a pretty, a couple of years in, and before that I was in a lot of sales and a procurement position. So I have a really weird past, but it's led me here. So this is exciting times for me.
Yeah, that's great. Welcome on board. We're excited to have you here at the city. How have your first 6 months here as a director been?
They've been pretty incredible. It's been a whirlwind. And as I mentioned, I was at the Urban Redevelopment Authority, so working in one agency, kind of working with city government. And now I'm working with, 3,000 other folks. So it's pretty amazing. It's a large ecosystem here. The staff here is incredible. And so I really feel lucky to work with such talented and passionate people around the things that they do. Just really great support from not only obviously internally at DCP, but people like Sarah Kinter, and Jen Gula, and other department directors, obviously the chief. So it's been a really great experience, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Definitely great. camaraderie across all the departments and directors and all.
Especially you guys now, especially now with with you guys, between you and Sherry, who's our, person who we work with in OMB, and of course, Patrick and Deputy Mayor Pollock. I mean, everybody, in OMB has been wonderful. So thank you all for helping me through my first budgeting season.
Thank you for the kind words. We appreciate that. Yeah, well, can you give everybody that's on here an idea of how the Department of Planning is organized?
Sure. I mean, it won't get too in depth because there's a lot going on here, but we have five, 6 divisions, plus the director's office, which includes communications, and obviously our business, our office manager, which is a huge task for us as we're transitioning out of this building into another one. So, but we do have a new division of accessibility and compliance, which we may mention later. We have a public history, art and design division, which is run by Sarah Minard, is assistant director there. Audrey Wells is our communications and engaged PGH specialist. Lisa Ray is our business manager here. Our strategic planning division is run by Assistant Director Sharonda Watley, who just arrived here a couple of months ago. So it's exciting to have her here. Our sustainability and resilience division is run by Rebecca Kiernan. And our zoning and development review is run by Corey Lehman, and our deputy director, who's been really a great support and who I've known for some time, is Andrew Dash.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely a lot going on. But a lot of great things happening as well.
Right, and I'm sorry, I forgot. And this is actually the really exciting thing. I'm sorry, Adam, to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
And I mean, a lot of what you're with our ASL interpreters, our American Sign Language interpreters, is run out of our accessibility and compliance division. It's a new division that we just started by Hillary Roman, who's our ADA coordinator for the entire city. She does not just work, obviously, with city planning, but assists with the mayor's office and city council on engagement with the community. So we're excited to have that and hope to broaden the scope of the work that comes out of accessibility and compliance.
No, that's definitely great. And you kind of mentioned some of these, like the accessibility and compliance, public art and civic design. But yeah, how do you see the operating funds helping the residents through these different different departments?
Yeah, so it's a lot of work that we do. So we do planning also, but we also work in the compliance capacity. I'm not as intense as PLI as far as what Director Kinter described. So we do obviously a lot of planning coordination with residents, business owners, developers, other departments. We work closely with DOMI, for example, on our infrastructure and mobility pieces of our planning. We implement and coordinate the plans that we actually get adopted. We do parks planning. We do a lot of coordination with the authorities, Housing Authority, URA, PWSA, and others. We actually staff our boards and commissions here. We have the Planning Commission, Zoning Board, Art Commission, Historic Review Commission. We have some internal pieces of a design review that we actually staff as well. We have projects like the Percent for Art through our Public History, Art and Design Division, as well as Climate Action Planning through our resilience. So we do a lot of variety of things that really touch upon people's day-to-day lives in the built environment and in the public realm, really. So, I mean, it's a lot, and we actually do a lot of, we have consultants, obviously do a lot of research, and other things that are necessary to get, our plans created and to actually reach out to communities and residents specifically to figure out, how we can best make the city a place that they can enjoy to live, work, and play.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think it's so interesting learning a lot of this stuff. I just started with the city in November, so sometimes I feel like I'm still new at learning different things. So it's always really exciting for me to, hear from the directors what all is going on. Can you share any new initiatives that you'd like to highlight from your team?
Well, I did just highlight one. That was the our newest division of accessibility and compliance. And I do think we're going to probably talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan, but that's, having outreach and making sure that, we have not only ASL, but like we have interpreters in different languages potentially around this from an accessibility standpoint is going to be really important for us. We're actually about to start strategic planning. So that's more internal, but it does impact, a lot of the work that we're going to do around the comp plan, which we'll get into later. So I don't want to spend too much time on that right now because we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But that's pretty much it. So I think once we get out strategic planning, we will be able to talk about, other initiatives that we'll be able to actually pursue within neighborhoods around the city.
Thank you. Yeah. And, just I think it'd be an important piece. Can you explain and talk a little bit about a comprehensive plan? Is this a long-term or short-term plan? I think this is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so we have bits and pieces of what we're considering a comprehensive plan. So that has been worked on for some time. So for example, when I arrived here a little more than 10 years ago, we had the open space plan that I was a part of as I was on the team as a part of the steering committee for that, as well as the historic preservation plan. So we do have, starts of the plan and we started planning, but I think it's time for us to put together like a comprehensive plan that we can share with the city that comes out in a couple of years. I do believe that that's something that came out of our transition document that was shared with us, the transition teams, as well as, obviously the team internally wants to actually get a comprehensive plan on the ground, and a lot of residents do as well. So it is probably going to be a multi-year process to get it all done. And it'll be a long-term plan. I think we're looking at like a 2050 plan, for example, so 25 years out. So I consider that to be long-term for me. But the process will take some time to do with some deliverables, in between. So yeah, I think we want to look at do a review of the past of the city and land use specifically around how this land was used by Indigenous First Nations, right? And kind of take a little trip down memory lane, so to speak, to see how that has changed over time, who has actually been on this land and how we've been using it. I think another portion of it will probably entail, as we're still developing what we're going to do, the bones of it, of who we are as a city now and what our values, and principles are going forward. Who do we want to be in the future, right? So I always say it's important to have young people as a part of this because it's a plan really for people who are 0 to probably 40 in my head, right? What is it going to look like for those individuals? So reaching out to them will be important. And then there's actual detailed components of the plan. And so that'll probably include, all the topical things that we discussed. Obviously the public art, history, civic design will be a huge part of it, as well as our sustainability and resilience work around climate. Obviously, we're working with different departments. For example, facilities is wanting to do a facilities plan potentially, and the forest division has a plan that's coming out. So we want to work with other departments as well. So it's a lot. And then of course the zoning and some code changes. Obviously, if we're going to be looking at a plan 25 years in the future, how does that change the way our boards and commissions work, how our code looks? And, how our zoning looks. I think the zoning overhaul, we'll probably do all these things over time, but we'll have a published document that's going to be maybe a physical copy, but definitely online to guide the city's development and what the city looks and feels like over the next 25 years.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, definitely plan, definitely long-term. And it's great. It sounds like, a lot of individual residents will be impacted, like you were saying, from young children to older adults.
Yeah.
With that plan, how do existing or in progress neighborhoods plan to work together on the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, so I think it'll definitely, and from a long-term perspective, we obviously hope to continue to update it as we see trends changing, right? We want to be able to be responsive to things that are trending. Climate is something that obviously is something that's top of mind. And actually how we have, looked at the racism that actually has been a part of initial planning in cities throughout the country. We're no different, right? So how do we reverse those wrongs, right? So looking at the redlining, racial steering that has occurred and trying to figure out how to, and because this has a huge impact on Black residents specifically, that we still see in the city today. So how do we start to reverse those trends? and looking at what's happening in benchmarking other cities that are doing planning processes as well. Obviously, we are a city of Pittsburgh and we're special and wonderful. But we all kind of look at what other folks are doing around the country and even internationally, because we are becoming a smaller and smaller place. So understanding what's happening globally, for example, how does the global South, how does looking at Africa and South America, for example, help us in our planning processes with regard to climate change, as we're dealing with the actual effects of it. And even from a racial standpoint, how are some cities dealing with the racist planning that's occurred, and how are they actually addressing it through various policies and processes and zoning? So we're definitely exploring all of that. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not. I probably went on a huge tangent, but
No, you're fine. I mean, it's definitely, it's a lot involved, so I totally understand it.
It's a lot. And we're still, again, we're still in development around it, working closely with Carlton Talapoli, who's the Chief Economic Development Officer, and obviously wanting to make sure that we're working closely, with community groups to kind of, not everybody, obviously, because the NESA comp plan, but what do we need in this comprehensive plan? So I think as we figure out strategic plan, how do we actually engage around what needs to be done? And obviously COVID is another thing that, we had to actually deal with. It exposed a lot of injustices that we've already known about, but it really kind of put a spotlight on them. So how do we actually address housing, opportunity, food access? How do we address transportation? We're working closely with DOMI around mobility issues, and we have a lot of vacant land. And I'm sure Jen will go into that next, but we have to figure out how do those things intersect with the built environment, how people live in it, and the injustices that we've actually seen, particularly around African-American and Latino communities around COVID. So we want to make sure that we're keeping up with the trend of public health is a part of city planning, right? So, making sure that people are healthy and organizing things in a certain way. And so making sure that we're doing that and we're doing it well and with everybody's input at the city through our comprehensive planning process. So it's a lot to think about, and I'm up nights, Adam. I'm up nights.
I'm sure. No, thank you so much. I mean, it definitely is. Your department has a lot that is working on, and a lot of stuff that's great for the city of Pittsburgh residents. And with that is, how can the community engage with your department?
Yeah, this is the exciting part that we're interested in. So working with, we've been sitting with Audrey Wells, who's our communications person, and really trying to understand, this is a journey that we're going through as a city, right? So we don't want this to be the Department of City Planning's plan, we want this to be the city's plan. And so, we're trying to document, really how we're getting there and really engage communities. So I think that looking at the history of the neighborhoods and the land use, wanting to really kind of have exhibits, for example, have events for community so that we can engage around what's happening. I believe a few years back, there were interviews that people did with neighborhood residents around their neighborhoods. And so how do we start to document these experiences that people have in histories that have been passed down by generations? Do we do a short documentary? Do we do an exhibit? Do we work with artists and communities to figure out what we can do as an art installation around our comp plan? Obviously, there's community development and meetings, because we all have to do that. And we have the Engage page, which of course will have a lot of feedback, but everybody has, the digital divide is real, right? And so how can people get involved over time? And so we're just hoping that, we have young people. I mean, I think the strategic planning director, and I totally love this idea of can we do a young people's plan, for, young people? Can we actually engage with the PPS, for example? We're big dreamers in planning, right? But how can we engage with PPS, to get young people involved with the future of their city that they will be living in, and they'll be replacing people like me and you to do just this, right? And so I think it's important that we look at, how do we work with the seniors about their living, right? How do we look at that? How do we talk to the sustainability, environmental justice folks? How do we talk to Black women about what they want to see in the future? I think that's a huge for me, it's personal, but it's also, we know from the gender equity report that this is a really difficult, challenging place for a lot of Black women to live. And so really understanding the most marginalized of us, right? The folks who actually need us to actually, talk with them and walk them through what this process could mean for them and their children. That's very, very important to our department. We've obviously discussed it internally and obviously the administration. So people who have just not benefited or who've actually by design have been alienated from planning processes in the past. We have a Spanish speaking population here. We have people who speak Arabic. We have people who speak all kinds of languages, and really trying to determine how we get to everybody. We are a city that's representative and has a growing immigrant population. So, really trying to make sure that we are trying to do our very best, because we are desperately wanting to have everybody's voice in this plan, so that, again, it is not a plan of people who've always had access, but it's a plan for people who have not had access, and and so we can have a collective voice around who we are as a city. So that's where we want to be around engagement, because it's truly important for us to make sure that we're welcoming to people who are not from here, from this country or the city, that we are actually allowing people opportunity to thrive. And we're doing it with a justice lens to it. So I think these are things that are important to the administration, and obviously very, very many number of residents who live here, and obviously to our department.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And it's awesome to see that there's a lot of different ways that you're all trying to get community engagement. And yeah, there's definitely lots of different ways for people to be involved. And even you mentioned at one point Engage PGH, that's the online portals. And at the end of this, we'll have links up to those as well. So people that do want to get engaged through, through the website and stuff, you can. But otherwise, there's going to be lots of other opportunities coming up through your department. I'm excited to see those. So
yes.
Any other comments or anything from you?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and obviously those of you who are in the public from this discussion, this forum. And I look forward to, hopefully you'll have some questions for me, but just look forward to really kind of developing this process and really meeting more and more residents, as I have been over the past 6 months. It's been an exciting time. And so thank you, Adam, for this moment. And I'll be around for the Q&A.
Thank you, Director Abrams. Really appreciate it. So up next, and thank you everybody for staying on. I see those chats are filling up, so thanks for throwing in questions. Up next is going to be Department of Finance, but before that, we have another quiz. So I'm going to throw that up right now for you. Real estate taxes make up what percentage of the 2022 budgeted general fund revenue? Great. So it looks like the majority of people were thinking 33%. And second was 23%, and that was a close one. So for this one, it actually is 23%, and it's the largest revenue category for the city of Pittsburgh. And up next, we're going to have questions and Q&A with Finance Assistant Director Jennifer Gula. Yeah, let's kick things off about Department of Finance. Can you tell us about how the Department of Finance is organized?
Sure. We have approximately 50 employees, and they're spread out amongst about 5 different divisions, which are the business tax division, real estate tax division. We have the business intelligence section, administration, and 3TB, which is property sales. So
yes,
I'm sure at one point in time, almost everybody has touched some aspect of our department within their lives in the city. So
I would definitely agree. And, looking at the operating budget, there's huge allocations for employee benefits. It's around 106 million and debt services, 60 million. Can you explain what these operating costs are?
Sure. They actually take up most of finance's budget. So it's actually the pension contribution, our obligations to pay for city employees, retired city employees, and the debt service, which we actually pay back the money on the bonds that we borrow and are owed to bondholders for the capital budget. So if you actually look in the budget document towards the back, It'll show you what our debt service is every year, and then our projection of borrowings based on the 5-year capital plan that's submitted by the capital portion of OMB every year.
Nice.
Other
Yes.
than that, yeah. Other than that, the rest is made up of just, staff and supplies and professional services.
Yeah, and for people that do maybe happen to get in the budget books and look around, there's some special revenue accounts, 3 taxing bodies trust fund. Can you explain a little bit about this?
So the 3 taxing bodies trust fund is actually what sort of drives the city's property sales. And it's called 3 taxing bodies because it would be tax dollars that would be owed to the city of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, and the city of Pittsburgh School District. So if there's a property that's tax delinquent, we would take it in through treasurer's sale. If somebody requested to buy it, if for whatever reason it doesn't end up being purchased by someone at the sale, then it would actually go into the inventory in 3TB. So the sales that are made from 3TB are there to recoup lost tax dollars or maintenance fees kept on property that are being held in the inventory. We
Thanks,
have,
yeah.
yes, so it's a bit confusing, but, and we do have our employees in 3TB, of which there's only maybe 4 or 5 really, but they split their time doing the items that they do for 3TB specifically are paid out of the trust fund. And then if they help with any other real estate related, like tax collection, it's usually paid from the general fund.
And yeah, thank you for sharing. I think it's definitely interesting stuff, and Department of Finance has there's a lot of different things going on. So thank you for explaining that. How would you say your operating funds help residents deal with property?
It's mostly all staff and tax collection. So it's all related to revenue collection. So if we can't bring the money in, we can't actually disperse it to any of the other departments in order to operate their budgets or meet any of their priorities or special projects that they have going on that would actually go back out into the community specifically. So all of our operations are, our operating budget goes to that. So all of our staff is either collecting money, balancing money, banking money, moving money. It's all related to money.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. And with with when it comes to dealing with property and all, especially on real estate, can you talk a little bit about the eProperties Plus?
Sure. So eProperties Plus actually is a database. It's a system that we use to maintain all of our city-owned properties. So within it are not just the properties that the city is putting for sale, which is what you would see if you went onto the finance department website. You would see that portion of it that would have all the properties that we're willing to sell. Also included in that are the properties that the city would hold indefinitely. So these would also include like any of the firehouses, the police stations, like anything that's specifically deeded to the city for our use only would also be in that system. And then we use it as well to operate our sales process from that. And this year, actually, we instituted a land care program. It's the first year that we've done that, thanks to some ARPA funds that were given to us generously. So we started a land care program this year, which we're able to fund a number of different contractors. Most of them are, smaller and community oriented, to go out and actually cut and tend to city lots. So there's that, but we actually are running and hopefully starting an app that would allow the vendors to, we could push a job to a vendor and tell them, I need you to cut this lot. And then they could, do it and send us pictures and invoices, all so it's seamless from back and forth from us to the vendor. It'll also help us engage other departments like DOMI and DPW and PLI, where we also might coordinate to tend to certain properties.
That's pretty exciting to see what y'all are looking to do in the future. I think that'd be great. So it got community involvement and making sure all those the lots and everything are being taken care of. Can you? And this is just a little more on the technical side, but when it comes to sales and all, can you explain the differences between the treasurer sale and the sheriff sale?
Sure. Treasurer's sale is specific to recuperating city tax dollars that have not been paid, but it also could include other types of municipal liens like demolition costs, or that PLI, might have demoed somebody's house and they haven't paid. So that would also attach to the property. A clean and lien would also attach to the property, and they would be included in what we call the upset price. So at treasurer's sale, those amounts would be part of the selling price or the bid price, and we would collect those as the base amount. I mean, it could always go higher if there's more than one person interested in purchasing, but so that those costs would be recuperated when the property is finally transferred in ownership to the new person. We only deal with municipal liens. That's it. So yeah, a sheriff's sale would be for everything else. So if you had a bank lien or a construction lien or anything of that nature, including our liens, they could actually collect for those at sheriff's sale, but we are sort of like, I think, pushed down to the bottom where we may not get all of our money at sheriff's sale that's owed to us, but maybe a piece of it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, like I said, it's interesting being on here and hearing all the different directors and all speak about their departments. I'm learning stuff as well, just listening to you all. So thank you for sharing everything and your knowledge. And when it comes to the budget and forecasting revenue, how do y'all do that? How do y'all forecast the revenue?
So a few years back, we actually produced a document that gives us sort of guidelines on how to actually do that. We look at past revenues that have been collected and look for trends, obviously. And then we use real data that's collected by an outside source called IHS Market. And it gives us things like the county, employment information or inflation or gross county product. And so depending on the revenues, we use those types of data in order to forecast going out.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Is there any different ways that the community can get involved with your department?
Only, I guess, we would always take questions from anybody, or we would always take just information on how to make things run for us more efficiently and also for the public. So obviously, selling property is a big one and maintaining property is a big one. And like I said, we did roll out a new program this year, which actually was doing very good, but it's obviously not without fault either. So there's always room for improvement. They could always call the administration line, or they could drop lines to any of the email addresses on the website as it pertains to their specific topic, like business tax or property sales. And they could call 311 for now.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, definitely different ways to reach out. So definitely appreciate that. And is there any other comments or anything that you want to mention?
I don't think so, except for the fact that, not only have we started building out eProperties Plus, but we also have taken 2 legacy tax collection systems that are like 25 years old. And we've started to build a new system that would actually allow the customer or the taxpayer to go online and see their own accounts and what they owe, see when their payments have been processed. And it'll combine any of the business taxes and real estate all in one system, where before they were separate. So there'll also be greater ability to pay online, especially where business tax is concerned. We were never able to allow someone to file a form and pay online with a credit card. So something like that will be coming to the portal as well. And hopefully, instead of mailing, we'll be able to send email blasts to people or text messages telling them, when tax payments are due or when forms need to be filed. So they won't have to rely on US mail sending us things here and there. It should make it much faster.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's awesome. It seems like it'll be some different ways people can access these payments and all, and that's great. So, well, Assistant Director Aguilar, we really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for coming on and talk a little bit about the Department of Finance. And so, Director Polly, I just saw that you hopped on here in 1 second. I just wanted to share with everybody else about the public engagement. We really appreciate you all coming on here, listening, and your input. So I'm very critical. Up next, there will be some links, and on those links you can go on. We actually have surveys out that we really encourage people to get on and fill out. They're for operating capital budgets for 2023. What we do with those is we take those surveys in and we relay them back out to the department directors, the mayor's office, and city council offices. Also, make sure you're getting there, connecting through 311, city council members. A lot of times they have different meetings that you can be listening in on. But also we have city councils. They're all online. They're on through city's page, or you can go into YouTube. They have a city YouTube page as well, and you can see what is going on daily life of the city of Pittsburgh. So up next, I'm gonna let here's the resources right here actually. So y'all can see those. The Engage PGH that was mentioned a little bit ago, but that's where you can get on there and do the surveys. Up top, we got the OMB that has our page where you'll see all the operating budgets, the capital budgets, budget and brief, and quarterly reports. Operating capital budgets can be pretty intense. They're pretty long, but the budget and briefs are really nice. They're a quick resource to see what's going on with the money throughout the city, as well as the quarterly reports. Down on the bottom, contact information. That's the operating team's email. So feel free to send anything to there, any questions or comments, and the capital one is on there as well. And up next, I'm gonna let Director Polly take it over.
Thank you very much, Adam. Appreciate you facilitating the Q&A with the department directors who joined us tonight. I'm going to first start, as the slide indicates, with a couple of outstanding questions in the chat, one of which is about the utilization of ARPA, or American Rescue Plan Act dollars, in the city's budget, both generally and as it relates to the scope of funding that we've talked about this evening. So one of the questioners asks that there are $41 million of ARPA funds utilized in the operating budget. Those funds go away in 2024, and they cover ongoing operating expenses and what will the city do generally to fill that shortfall when those funds are gone. That's an excellent question. Thank you, Matthew, for asking it. I want to start by just sort of mentioning that all of the funds that are deployed from the American Rescue Plan to support the operating budget fall under a classification in the federal and U.S. Treasury articulated process that qualify under a category called lost revenue. So when we expend American Rescue Plan Act dollars to fill an operating budget deficit, it is intended, and on the back end we have to account for it as accounting for revenue that was temporarily lost during the coronavirus pandemic. So as a more specific answer to that question, annually, including even right now, the Department of Finance and the Office of Management and Budget are working on revised revenue estimates for the 2023 fiscal year, which will take into account what we expect to be both our operating revenue and any COVID-related operating revenue shortfalls that are accountable to the pandemic. and revise our projections on that basis. So there is a budget based on what are now 2021 derived projections for 2022 that determine what we think that operating deficit will be this year and into future years. And the operating portion of the ARPA allocation plan is based on that. As we update those revenue projections, we may determine that either general government revenues are recovering more or less quickly than we anticipated a year ago, and we'll update those operating projections on that basis, and the amount of ARPA funds that are allocated to covering operating costs will go up or down based on that projection. In either scenario, the expectation is that at the end of the 2024 fiscal year, when operating support from ARPA eclipses, that we'll be able to absorb any or all of those costs into our operating budget, because they are by definition temporary supplemental support to bridge gaps that were created. So that's very much built into and forecasted for in our operating budget process. Any new dollars that we can shake loose, if you will, by exceeding those projections will be folded into other ARPA expenditures, and any increased expenses, if our revenues aren't recovering appropriately, will be deducted from those expenditures. So there's no net loss at the end of that process to the city's operating budget. And in any circumstance, our objective is to plan for future operating costs in line with need and available revenue. This is, as it relates to the operating budget, completely budgeted as a temporary supplement to help us bridge operating losses as a result of the pandemic. And so should not affect our ability to adequately prepare for future expenditures. Looking forward, give me a second. The next question in the chat that has not yet been addressed is a question about demolitions and the need for additional service to abandoned properties. So I'll ask Director Kinter to respond to that one.
Nicole's question is about an abandoned property that's next door to her and has some nuisance rodent problems. Nicole just responded to you in chat, but thank you, Director, for the opportunity to respond to. We talked a little bit about condemned buildings in the capital budget forum. There are over 1,900 condemned buildings in the city of Pittsburgh, and PLI is responsible for demolishing the worst of the worst. Most condemned buildings are privately owned. And even if they're condemned, they don't transfer hands to the city necessarily. Most, again, remain privately owned. We have the funding to demolish about 65 unsafe and dangerous structures annually. And so in order to determine what gets demolished, we have a scoring system where we score condemned buildings, and the worst of the worst are the ones that we demolish. So you can see on, we have a website called Agency Counter where you can look up an address and see what the score is of a condemned building to get an idea of whether or not it's going to make it to the demolition list. And we are also able to issue or request clean and liens so that yard debris and garbage can be cleaned up. Sometimes that is an attractive nuisance and causes rodent problems. So you can feel free to direct message me the address, and we can see what complaints are in there and make sure that gets addressed.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate your response on that one. I would say generally that while funds to address condemnations typically fall within the capital budget, as Director Kinter just mentioned, they're understandably a cause for concern to a lot of city residents. Generally speaking, the Gainey administration's intent is to find a way in which we can head those issues off at the pass by addressing properties prior to them being scheduled for condemnation. But of course, there are a lot of procedural obstacles to that. So in the short term, addressing those on a case-by-case basis, as the director mentioned, is critical. So I'll quickly address a follow-up question from Matthew about the ARPA allocation question. You're correct that the actual accounting basis for foregone revenue and the operating budget has not yet met the controller's office's estimate, and to that point, as we reconcile those figures in this fiscal year, that may or may not result in future forecasts for available ARPA funds, which then again could impact the allocation of those funds into the future. The actual accounting and reconciliation of those budgets follows the forecast. So there may be additional ARPA funds that become available to be allocated into the future as our 2023 revenue projections are ultimately delivered, confirmed, and reconciled. And again, I'll admit that any funds available to the city under the American Rescue Plan, which are not, which have previously been accounted for as operating subsidies, but which are not ultimately necessary or expended in that way, will potentially become available for reallocation. There are potentially some other questions for us to address, but in the interim, I want to open the forum up to questions that are not contributed in the chat.
Hello, everyone, and thank you guys for your time. It's really appreciate it. I had multiple questions. I guess it's regarding PLI for the most part, for the last, and please forgive me, I'm not exaggerating. For 5 years, we've been calling about them clearing a couple lots. Mainly, it's actually my son. He lives across the street from me. And to clear out the lots, and they actually want to purchase as side yards. As I said, 5 years, and we still have not been able to get them to come out. They call 211, and we've done that. He has done it. I've done it multiple times. It just gets questionable. It gets very discouraging. What else is there to do? There was an inspector that came out regarding a property next to me. They were trying to build a B&B, this young couple. And I reported all the trash and stuff they were leaving because I started seeing mice. Well, come to find out, they didn't have a building permit. They were practically finished with the building. And all of a sudden, someone showed up. And he said, well, we only have like 12 people working in this office, which, I empathized. But to have waited 5 years to have any response, and it's city-owned property that, has not been taken down. I mean, there is so much, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone, but as I said, it's very discouraging.
I appreciate that feedback, and I apologize. I missed your name. That's
quite all right. It's actually Yvonne. I don't know how it went over as hammer. I must have.
Okay. Well, thank you, Yvonne, for your comment. I do appreciate it, and apologies for the frustration. Director Gula talked a little bit about a new contract that the city instituted this year to take better care of vacant city-owned lots. So we hope to see some and hope that you will see some better results on properties that are vacant and need to be cut by the city and should be maintained by the city. PLI does issue violations to finance so that they know when properties need to be cut, but we're trying to make that a smoother process. We shouldn't have to wait for a complaint to know that we have to go out and maintain a lawn, and that's the object of the objective, excuse me, of the new contract.
Okay. So should one call PLI again?
So it's, yeah, I think it's always worth putting in a complaint through the 311 system. If you pick weeds or debris, it goes right to a PLI inspector. And we'll make sure that finance knows work needs to be performed at that lot.
Okay, we'll give it another shot.
Thanks, Yvonne.
All right, thank you.
Yvonne, just to add, this is Jennifer, the finance director.
Hi,
I think I
Jennifer.
just sent, hi, how are you? I think I just sent you a response to your first question about property purchase. But
Mhm.
also, if you want to send me the lots that you're referring to for this specific case, I could actually look into it and see. Not all of the city lots are actually part of the land care program.
Mhm.
So I could at least let you know, but then on our end, we'll figure out how to get somebody out there to get the lots taken care of.
Actually, Jennifer, there were two things. I spoke about just now the empty lots next to my son and daughter-in-law that they
Mhm.
have been looking to purchase. They actually got penalized and sent a fine for something they did not even own, had to go to the magistrate because of the empty lots that belong to the city. Yeah, they were penalized. Now, what I am speaking of, there is a house that I've been here now, back home here, Pittsburgh, 14 years, maybe a little longer. But there's an empty house down the street that I would love to get my hands on. I have a daughter that would, with her fiance, would take it over, fix it up. He does, what do you call it, housework or whatever, drywall and all that. Trying to find out who owned it to maybe even approach them. Can't find out. It's under some LLC that's like probably non-existent. They said I called the real estate finance department. They said put in an application. I did that, and it's been since the beginning of this year, and I have not heard anything. And I understand you guys with all this other stuff going on.
Well, that's part of it, but is the property, so we don't own the property, it's owned by an LLC, correct?
It doesn't say that it's owned by, this property is not owned by the city, no.
Right. And if it's tax delinquent, so what has to happen first is we would actually have to put it into a treasurer sale in order for us to be able to take the property in.
Mhm.
So it would go up for treasurer sale. And if no one bid on the property and then it was transferred over into city ownership, then we could, you could fill out an application to purchase that then from us.
Mhm.
So, or you could go to the treasurer sale and bid on it.
Right.
So that's how we have to start it first. So,
While Jen's muting on that topic, I'll just, weigh in to clarify a point she was making. Just because a lot may be vacant does not mean that the city owns it or has control of it. You mentioned
Yes.
that it's owned by a private party. To the extent that they have clear title and are current on their taxes, it's not something that we as a city government have an ability to intervene in to compel or otherwise, move a sale.
To interject now, I want you to understand we're talking about two different things. One are lots next to my son's house, which are vacant and are owned by the city, which they were attempting. They did put in applications to purchase, but the city has not maintained them. And they actually got penalized, had to go to a magistrate because of it. And it wasn't even theirs yet. They told them, well, you have to clean the lot and you got to clear, but it wasn't even theirs. And
No,
then there's a house. So that's something separate.
I appreciate the distinction you're drawing.
Okay.
And to the extent, I believe there are ways in which we can be helpful, at least in that instance, right? To the extent that the ownership has become confused through the title clearing process, and they're being unnecessarily penalized for maintenance that is not yet their legal responsibility, then I fully understand your point there, and
Okay.
I think would be happy to assist there.
All
On
right.
the subject of another property that's held by a private owner and it's not presently in public ownership, absent a tax delinquency there that would present us an opportunity to take ownership and then convey it, we may have limited opportunity to intervene. But in either case, I think you've already sent at least one of the property identifying his characteristics, either an address or property ID to Director Gula. If you could send both to her so that we can clear that up, we'd be happy to assist.
I'm very grateful, and thank you all so very much for clearing and assisting. And I appreciate what you're doing, trying to streamline things. I really do. Hopefully there is hope after all.
Sure. Thank you very much. I believe there's another question in the chat from, saw one from Rob. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Rob, you mentioned, this is Rob Pfaffman. One of the challenge for small businesses is that there's a lack of interagency collaboration around or coordination around permit review between DOMI, the Department of City Planning, and PLI. So approval times are longer than sometimes advertised or may forestall the process. I think Director Kinter responded to this, but I'll just note generally that you're absolutely correct in raising this issue and that we are working to align and streamline our approval processes to reduce that. The one-stop process that several others have commented on this evening, while not entirely complete, is meant to facilitate that streamlining of procedure. If you have further specific questions or examples to raise, be happy to discuss them. But as Director Kinter mentioned in the chat, you're absolutely correct that there's still work left to do in facilitating a clean and consistent consideration of those proposals. So I'll give you a moment to weigh in if you'd like to unmute and raise any particular questions around that topic. Oh, I'm seeing that Rob left the meeting, so we'll let that stand as the response there. But again, always happy to discuss. Looking further in the chat for additional questions. Again, I'm seeing a follow-up from Matthew on American Rescue Plan funds, which is about the fact that those funds went to fill vacant positions and extend funding beyond the life of those funds. Again, just to reiterate, the way in which American Rescue Plan funds have been deployed in the operating budget is fundamentally to close operating budget deficits that we believe, based on revenue forecasts, would otherwise be supported by operating fund dollars were it not for the coronavirus pandemic. So in most cases, they have in fact backfilled positions that were previously budgeted, and then the revenue to support those positions fell short during the pandemic. We stand behind our projections, which suggests that by the time we reach the end of the availability of American Rescue Plan dollars in 2024, we will have recovered from a revenue perspective such that those positions can be supported with existing funds. As I mentioned, we'll continually reevaluate that every year when new operating fund revenue projections become available, and either adjust upward or downward in the extent to which we're relying on ARPA funds to fill those positions, but they're not going to create, in any instance, an operating deficit when we reach the end of the ARPA eligibility period. So I hope that answers that question. If not, I'm happy to discuss it further offline or in any other forum. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening to participate in this conversation, to contribute your questions, both in the chat and otherwise, to the conversation, and for helping us to shape the broad priorities and perspectives that will be important to the development of the 2023 fiscal year operating budget. As Pat mentioned in his earlier presentation, we're going to take this feedback into account as we develop our budgetary proposals for the coming fiscal year, and there will be another opportunity for the public generally to weigh in on those priorities and those proposals when the mayor releases a preliminary budget proposal in September ahead of a final budget proposal in November. So we would very much like to ask everyone to look forward to weighing in on that proposal as we advance it later in the year. But in the interim, thank you for showing up tonight, learning about the construction of the operating budget. And we look forward to engaging with you more in the near future. So thank you very much. And I'll quickly thank you, Adam, for putting this slide up. We want to appreciate everyone here for their contribution. We want to very much thank the staff from the Department of Innovation and Performance in the City Channel Bureau for helping us broadcast tonight's event. Thank the Office of Neighborhood Services and the communications team for facilitating tonight's discussion and helping us to promote it. And thank all of the departmental staff who participated. And last, but certainly not least, the sign language interpreters who helped us make sure that this evening's discussion was accessible. So unless there are any further notes, thank you for being here, and we look forward to talking in the near future.